Hello and welcome to this session called Finding Your Creative Mojo. My name's Benedict Brain. I'm a photographer and journalist. I've been working in and around the world of photography for the best part of the last 30 years, and I think it's fair to say that in that time I've had my share of creative successes and also possibly more than my fair share of creative failures. I've spent much of my time around creative folk, and I've put together today for you a half a dozen tips that I feel might help you in one way, shape or form on your own creative journey, whether you're a seasoned professional photographer or whether you're relatively new to photography. I hope that these tips might help you on your creative journey. So the first of my tips is really flexing your creative muscles. Much like going to the gym or running to get fitter and stronger, you have to do on a repetitive basis. You have to exercise regularly to become strong and fit. The same with creativity. Creativity is not necessarily something that we are naturally gifted with, we're naturally born with. I think that can be a mistake that some people make, that some people are either creative or not. It is something that can be learned, it's something that can be nurtured, and by doing exercises it's something that can be really nurtured to make you a more creative individual. So just like going to the gym to get stronger and fitter, you need to go to the creative gym to become a little bit more creative. So exercising every day can be really useful, but sometimes it's difficult to know exactly what to do. And so setting yourself little exercises can be a useful little tool. Just a little 5-minute exercise every day can help. And with smartphones and the ease with which you can use them, they're a great way to have a sort of digital photographic sketchbook, if you like. One of the things I like to do, in the example I show you here, is just using a piece of paper, putting it near a window and photographing it every day for a week or even a month. And every day just trying to photograph it in a slightly different way, just with an iPhone. These images were just taken with a smartphone, with an iPhone, just using natural light, just curving the paper in slightly different ways, trying to evoke different moods, challenging myself every day. And after a week or 10 days, I think I did it for about 20 days in total, I ended up with an interesting collection of pictures that had helped exercise my creativity. I don't know if I'll ever do anything with them. They're not particularly, wonderful pictures, but they're useful in exercising my sort of visual awareness, my creativity, something to think about. Just took 10 minutes to shoot and process every morning as just a little exercise to get into the mode. And if you don't fancy photographing a piece of paper, or you've already done this before, try another object. Here's a picture of a potato, but just have an object, any object. You could just put it by a window and just challenge yourself to photograph it every day for a period of time, and just see how you can reinterpret it every day. This potato has been useful as a way to experiment with some lighting, and you can see here. And if you fancy it, photograph a potato and enter it into Potato Photographer of the Year, which is soon to launch and will raise money for the Trussell Trust. A 365 project, which I've done here, is another great way to just challenge yourself on a daily basis with a quick 2, 3, 4, 5-minute exercise. This was a couple of years ago, 2018, I think. I challenged myself to photograph the sky every day, just pointing my camera up, and that turned into quite an interesting project in its own right. Again, I don't think it was going to change the history of photography, but it was a useful creative exercise. It got me looking, it got me seeing the sky, studying the light, looking for clouds, deciding which image I was going to use, and it made an interesting mosaic of colours, shapes, tones, textures, and so forth at the end of the year. Another good thing to do is to really embrace the idea of photographing banal things. That will challenge your creativity too. and put you to the test as a photographer. It's all very well going to a honey spot location at dawn during the magic hour in perfect weather conditions, but that's kind of easy. But going to a car park on the suburbs, on the outskirts of your city or town or village or wherever you happen to live, and trying to make some interesting and engaging photographs out of a car park or some little side street or the back of a dumpster or something like that. You can, if you start to look and learn to look, you can start to really hone your eye and make interesting pictures. So that's great practice just on your daily walk or whatever. Take out your camera and try to tease out some beauty from the banal. In this example here, you can see the 3 palm trees on the left. It's a relatively banal scene. It's a semi-industrial port zone on the Pacific coast in Central America, and it was a particularly drab and uninspiring day, seemingly totally unphotogenic, but just sniffing around with a camera, I just noticed these 3 palm trees on the left, and while they don't look particularly photogenic here, by just changing my angle, learning to look, learning to see potential images, even in these bland, seemingly quite boring scenes, you can create a picture. And here's an image here that I took, which has a very different style to when I first saw the palm trees and so forth, just evoking a very different mood and just learning to look and seeing beauty in those banal areas. So aside from flexing your creative muscles, you also need to be physically fit. I know when I was a young chap at art school studying photography, I kind of felt I wasn't particularly interested in fitness or exercise, and felt that being creative really meant sitting around in cafes, sipping coffee, drinking red wine, and smoking gouloirs while trying to be super cool. So that was kind of fun. But what I've realized since is that actually being physically fit is really beneficial to your creative fitness too. So rather late in life, I took up running. I became obsessed by running, and I have found that not only am I healthier as a consequence, but I'm also more alert. I feel more astute, and I have definitely, in the years that I have been running, have felt that my creative impulse has been much more attuned. And aside from that, the actual act of running is quite meditative, for me at least. If I'm on a new location, it's a great way to go on a quick scout, arrive at a location, put the running shoes on, and scout a couple of locations to go back and shoot the following day, or what have you. Now, it might be that running's not your thing, which is fine. It doesn't have to be running. Could be rowing, walking, swimming, anything. Just go to the gym. If you're not particularly fit, then start one of these programs like the Couch to 5K. They're an excellent way to get you moving. And I can guarantee that it will make you a better photographer and make you a more creative individual as a consequence. So the second of my tips is to create boundaries. I know when I was at art school many years ago, we had boundaries the whole time. We were in workshops and various seminars. We were held accountable to our tutors and to our peers. And then I graduated, and of course no one gave 2 hoots what I did. Nobody cared what I photographed, why I photographed it, when I photographed it, or anything. And suddenly I had no boundaries to rebel against or go with. And I found that really hard for a while. So I've tried to sort of enforce some boundaries. This is an example here. This is just going for a walk. It was a 10-kilometer walk from near where I live. I got the train to the next town and just decided to walk 10 kilometers back. I decided to take a picture every 250 meters. So I was taking about 4 pictures every kilometer, so about 40 pictures in total. And I just ended up with a quick, consistent little body of work that exercised my creativity and gave me some boundaries. And there's other boundaries you can enforce on yourself too. It doesn't have to be taking a picture every 250 meters. I could have, for example, set an alarm clock or a stopwatch and taken a picture every 2 minutes. In fact, that's possibly even a better way to do it. Go for a walk around your neighborhood, set a stopwatch for 2 minutes, and every time your stopwatch goes off, stop, take a picture, but react to the environment where you are. You'll then find yourself sort of nurturing and exercising your creativity. Make deadlines as well. They can be really useful. I mean, I hate deadlines, but they also are really good to work to as well. And if no one's giving you deadlines, then just put them in your diary and create that sense of urgency so that you get things done. And if you can, find someone that holds you accountable. It might be some other photographers, form a little collective. It might be your partner or a friend or family or something like that. But make a commitment that you're going to do something, and then try and find someone to make you accountable to do that, and give yourself deadlines and a roadmap to finishing a project or starting a project or various milestones in a project's lifetime. So my third point is really to sort of disengage. To be bored almost is quite a useful skill to develop. I often find that I take my best pictures, I'm at my most creative when I'm bored, when I'm disengaged from the digital world, when I'm stuck somewhere on holiday, for example, without Wi-Fi or 4G network, and I'm wandering around. I then sort of tend to turn to creativity, and my mind becomes much more active as a creative individual. So obviously we can't go on holiday all the time to disengage, but we can take steps in our daily life to disengage. We can turn off notifications on our phones, on our laptops and iPads, so that we're not getting the constant little red dots and pings distracting us from the moment. Take some time to just digitally disengage yourself and really just focus on what you're doing at hand. And it could just be 10, 15 minutes at a time, could be an hour, better still, a whole afternoon. But just make that time to almost be bored, so that you can just let your mind go down a creative path. Here's some pictures that I took recently, being a little bit bored and possibly frustrated during lockdown, not being able to travel as extensively as I used to be able to. I've taken to engaging with my local landscape much more intimately than I used to. In fact, areas that I would have just walked past or ran past and paid no real significance to have now become much more sort of poignant to me. And these sculptural landscapes, looking at the structures of the winter landscape over the winter lockdowns, I've become fascinated by the colours and the shapes and the tones and the textures in these structures of the sort of dead plants, which will soon be coming to life again. And I've started experimenting as well, and using flash in these situations when they wouldn't normally expect to have on-camera flash, and that's all sort of played into the creative process too. So my fourth point is to think of yourself as a professional amateur photographer. I love the word amateur. It really means to just do something for the love of it and not for money. It's a shame, it's a real shame that it's a word that's used with such negative connotations, because it is a great word. And I love the fact that there's amateur photographers around that just engage in photography just for the sheer love of it. I like to think of myself as a professional amateur photographer. I feel very grateful that I'm able to work as a photographer, but I still find joy in the photographic in the photographic process. I like experimenting and fiddling with photographs with the same sort of enthusiasm as I did as a newbie to photographer, many moons ago. Here are some images of some birds that I was messing around with recently, reinventing them, playing with them. I put them into a fast-moving GIF, added sound, And this was just a good way of having fun and experimenting. But out of that came a whole bunch of other things. And I'm always trying to have as much fun as I possibly can with photography in that way. And to that point, it's also useful to take risks. Just don't be frightened to take a risk. Here's a picture that I took where I was experimenting with focus. It's essentially a blurred picture. It's totally out of focus. People often challenge me, for example, that there's not even a photograph, that it's, but it was taken with a camera. It's a photograph. It just so happens I deliberately put the camera out of focus and created this blur for this sort of abstract. But it was a risk that I took, and I was happy to sort of play around with that idea. It was a question of fighting the fear of failure, and I, at the end of the day, I kind of decided I didn't really care what anyone thought, and I was just going to go ahead and do it. And I think that's a good way to operate as a creative individual. And remember, of course, if it does fail, you don't even need to show anybody. You don't need to advertise your failures. You don't need to have an Instagram account just for your pictures that aren't working. But if you don't try, you'll never know. And occasionally, every now and again, one of your risk-taking creative adventures might just yield a successful photograph, and then that might spark off onto a project in its own right, and then that project might become an exhibition or a book, or you might make print sales, or it might inform your professional practice. If you're a wedding photographer or a portrait photographer, for example, you might find that your risky experiments are actually paying dividends in many ways that you wouldn't have otherwise have expected. And my sixth point, which I think I've alluded to earlier on, is to make time, to block time in your diary to be creative. I often find that my to-do list, for every 2 things that I knock off my to-do list, another 3 tasks are added, and it seems to be a never-ending upward struggle to get to the top of my to-do list, writing articles, preparing workshops, taking photographs or commercial photographs, for example. And I always think, well, I'm going to engage in my own personal photography when I've got to the end of my to-do list. Of course, that never happens. So what I've started doing is blocking time in my diary. This afternoon, that afternoon, I am going to dedicate myself just to my own personal practice, to my own photography, and I'm not going to do anything else. And what I found is, of course, that that's a great period of time. I get creative, and that, of course, flows into all my other aspects of my work. I end up creating images that I can use in workshops, that I can use in articles, that I can sell for stock, that I can sell as art prints or whatever. And in fact, that time is not playtime. It is playtime, but it's not playtime, because some of that play ends up being really useful and plays into work that professional work and helps advance me in those aspects. So identify periods in your diary, a couple of times a month, I would say at least 2 or 3 afternoons a month, when you are just dedicating yourself to your own photography. Block them off in your diary. Don't accept any meetings or so forth. Unless it's a really well-paid job, of course. But just block them and just use that time to explore your own creative space. My last tip is really about giving back and creating and being part of a community. Photography can be quite a solitary pursuit, and it's really nice to feel that you're part of a community. In the old days, it was always nice to meet a bunch of photographers. You could meet at the end of the day, of a day's shoot. You would probably meet at the lab, dropping off your film, and then hop off to the pub for a few pints while they processed your film. Of course, that doesn't happen any longer. We all scuttle back to our homes, our studios and workshops and so forth, and we lock into our computers to start processing our raw files. So that sense of community has is harder to hold on to. So find some like-minded photographers, to hang out with, that photograph in the same way. We're so digitally connected these days that it doesn't necessarily need to be someone in your hometown. It could be someone in another country. But just hang out, exchange ideas, bouncing ideas off each other is a really, really, really good way to sort of advance your creative thinking. Go on workshops. Give workshops. They're a great way to explore your own work and to help other people on their journeys, their photographic journeys, whether it's technical or conceptual. So doing workshops is a really good way. It's a good way to learn for yourself too. I always learn something from creating a workshop, but also even if you do workshops all the time, go on other photographers' workshops. You can always learn. You can learn from the way that other people do their workshops. You can learn new skills, new approaches. I often try and get onto other workshops by other photographers as often as I can. And I don't know if you've heard of the Artist's Pledge, but that's another vehicle that could be used to support the creative community as a whole. Artist's Pledge, hashtag Artist Support Pledge, is something that was put in place in the first lockdown. And the general idea is that as a photographer or maker, you put your work on Instagram, you hashtag it with Artist Support Pledge. You put this red screenshot on your post, and the idea is that for every £1,000 worth of art that you sell, you then commit to spending £200 on somebody else's art. And so keeping that sense of community within the creative community is a really good thing to be a part of. So I hope some of these creative ideas will help you on your journey. I think we're going to take some questions now. So I shall disappear from the video and reappear in the virtual forum to take any questions about your creativity. Thank you. Okay, thank you for listening to that. As you can see, I've miraculously changed my shirt. If anyone's got any questions or insights or any experiences, do you want to fire them away in the question box, and I can take them now. I got a question from Joe here, who's thinking about maybe just using one focal length lens on a walk. That is a really good idea. I often am saying that in my workshops, that one of the best things that anyone can do to become a better photographer is to just use one focal length for a specified period of time. Something like a 50 mil or equivalent on a 35 millimeter 50 mil or 35 is a really good way to discipline the eye. And I am prepared to sort of say that I guarantee it would make you a better photographer. I mention this a lot on a lot of my workshops. And it does work. It does work very well. In fact, I forced myself to do it when I upgraded to the medium format camera. I could only afford one lens, so after banging on about using one lens all the time, I then found myself shoehorned into that corner, and it definitely made me a better photographer. Eventually, I had, because I make my living through photography, I had to add some other lenses, but it was a nice little period. So yeah, just using one focal length is a really good idea. Thanks for that, Joe. John has talked about photo books and looking at and suggesting Arnold Newman and Alex Soth. So I think, John, are you suggesting looking at photography books? If so, I think that's again a brilliant idea. I have a massive collection of photography books, and if I am stuck if I am stuck with an idea, I just kind of delve in there and start looking um, at some of those books for inspiration, and I tend to like stick to the grandmasters as well. Uh, Guy Guy Walsh, thanks. YouTube, who's talking about YouTube? You putting your I film YouTube videos. So you make videos, YouTube videos to help you fuel your creative process. Um, that's something that I haven't done that so much, but I am making a commitment to do some YouTube videos. So I'll be interested to do that. It plays into what I was talking about. I think the YouTube uh, um, makes YouTube can make you accountable, especially if you've got a commitment to do one on a regular basis. James is asking what my favorite photo book is. That's a really difficult question. If I just sort of angle, there's my bookcase there. You can see it's absolutely loaded with books. Um, it really depends. It really depends what mood I'm in. Um, at the moment, I'm really enjoying the Japanese photographer Rinko Kawauchi. So I have some of her books, which are lovely. But I wouldn't say it was my favorite photo book of all time. It's my sort of favorite photo book this week. Um, but as I put workshops together as well, and I start exploring different avenues, I discover old books, go back to them. I've been doing some workshops for the Royal Photographic Society recently, so I've been around myths and metaphors and narratives. So I've been relooking at some of the books and the photographers I studied on my degree course. So I've been going back to that, going back to some of those photographers that I sort of first started studying. Um, oh goodness knows how long ago. Um, so thank you for, there were some really good questions there. It's a bit weird doing these questions in this virtual space, but thank you for joining me. I hope that your own creative journeys are fruitful and well nourished. If you do any of your exercises, love to share them with me. I'd love to see them. I'm fairly prolific on social media. Benedict Brain, you can follow me, tag me on Instagram and so forth. Maybe I'll get a creative mojo hashtag going and we can all share our progress. If you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to me again on social media and so forth, or want to share. So thank you.